living la vida low carb. This show is changing lives. We talking about your diet, trying to get you feeling right. Cut up them avocados, fry some eggs, time to explore the longest running health podcast, hosted by Jimmy Moore. Time to give up the crappy garbage, we're getting into ketosis. Every day is a new step to your goal, yeah, you're getting closer. Motivated and focused, don't stop, just go. Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com.
So guys, that right there is Dr. Courtney Hunt. She is Courtney Hunt, MD, over on Instagram. Go follow her over there. She is a medical doctor and OBGYN, but we're really not going to talk about a lot of medical things specifically here today. She's got a much more interesting topic that I think you're going to really find fascinating. She is the author of a book called Your Spark is Light, which will be a lot of the concepts that we talk about here in today's show. And those of you watching live, or if you're listening to this or watching this on the replay later, this is also a fundraiser. Go support Children of the Night, Inc. I just see you got 3 more donations now, so we're up to 5. So let's get that to 100 donations by the end, you guys. But childrenofthenightinc.org, for those of you that are not watching this live, because you won't be able to participate, but go support that charity. What is that charity?
They rescue sex-trafficked women and children. So if a child calls in the middle of the night and needs a ride, or needs to be dragged out of whatever hellish situation they're in,
yeah,
they talk them through it. They bring them out. They give them education. They teach them online, internationally, and help them recover themselves and be able to get themselves back into society. Because once a child has gone through something like that, it takes a lot of work and a lot of back and forth to rescue that psychology of that poor kid. So they've been doing that for years and years and years, and they're doing a good thing.
Yeah, as someone who went through childhood trauma, I can personally attest to the lingering effects mentally well into adulthood if you don't deal with that stuff. So kudos to Children of the Night, Inc. for stepping up and helping those kids with their trauma.
Yep. And these are the most traumatized of traumatized kids.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, kudos to you for giving them a platform on your platform, but you are amazing. I just have to say this up front. I watch your videos. Guys, if you don't follow her on Instagram, again, Courtney Hunt, MD, on Instagram, she does these walks, and she's literally walking your dog this morning, throwing things, and it's just wonderful watching you do your thing, fitting it into your very busy schedule. And talking about a lot of these very deep subjects, which we're going to get into here today. What made you want to start doing that? Because you're kind of a fan of ketosis. You understand all the things that I've talked about for years. You're obviously a medical doctor and have a lot of knowledge about chronic disease and kind of all the interrelation of nutrition and lifestyle choices, but you don't really get into that a lot in your own work. Why?
I do get into it in my work. I mean, I've been doing live videos as long as Instagram has allowed live videos. So for years, I talked about thyroid and hormones and ketosis and why and what the mitochondria do. But there was a pull. Well, first, I started this account because I wanted my children to have access to all of the knowledge that I have in my words forever. So my information is digitally stored on Facebook forever, right? And then I started I always knew, but I started feeling this pull towards sunlight, towards morning sunlight. And I knew that there was something more going on inside of me than just watching the sunrise. And, because of the scientific knowledge that I had, I tried to figure out what that was. Yeah. And at first I called it a flow state. And it is a flow state. It's improving mitochondrial flow. But that, and then I try to take it back and explain, okay, you have to get enough water and you have to get enough electrolytes and slowly eliminate carbs. I do try to start each morning with a little bit of that, but man, my mind is like so clean and so on fire. I just want to talk about black holes and singularities that kind of stuff now.
You can get dime a dozen people talking about carbohydrate restriction, and I've been talking about it for 2 decades in my work, carbohydrate restriction, and the benefits of it physically. But I think you're on to something here, because I don't feel like we talk enough about the kind of things we're about to bring up here today. And they're interrelated with the physicality of the world. There is no physicality without all these things that we're about to discuss.
Right. Well, I'm going to take notes as we're talking because there's a lot of things that I want to cover. And I kind of feel like when I do these, we don't get to them all. So if you see me taking notes, it's just things that I want to make sure that I mention.
Hey, you make your cheat sheet. I have my cheat sheet of what you wanted to talk about. So,
I think as a foundation to this conversation, I also have that account because I know when you are sick and lonely and isolated, especially if you are in bad relationships, you have a really hard time making the decisions to pull you out. And there is no way to get better unless you see yourself well. I call it the quantum handshake, and that is literally how it works, and we can get into that. But if you live with someone, a spouse, a partner, a friend who is not helpful, meaning it could be something like they keep bringing beer home or they keep giving you candy.
Yeah.
You can't get yourself out. And some people are so sick, these moms that I see especially, they can't even lift the hair dryer to blow dry their hair, or they drop off their kids and they can't even do anything for the rest of the day. So I decided in 2019, okay, well, if nobody's going to help these people, I'm going to show up every morning and help these people.
Yeah.
So, so I want to say at the beginning rather than the end, if you want to work with me, I have a company called Genetic Protocol. I make supplements to help people. I do nutrigenetic testing. I have webinars. My book is free, but I also just show up every single day. And if you can't fix yourself, if you just show up and listen live for free every single day, I will be there at sunrise. I will be there at sunrise to meet you as much as I possibly can and hold your hand and just say, this is how I did it. This is what I do. This is what I do when I fall down, and be that support for people who don't have support.
Yes, and you are very much a support, and I love the way you have a giving heart for this because, yes, you do go on early. I'm an early riser on the East Coast, and I know you're kind of on the West Coast, and so when you're early, it's super early in the morning. For
yeah. I don't need a lot of sleep, so I'm like sitting there at 3:30 in the morning, Twitter, just when can I get out that mountain? And I wake up.
Yes. I have biphasic sleep, so I go to sleep around like 7:30 or so, and then I'm up around midnight 1, and then I stay up a few hours, and I go back to sleep a couple more hours. I've been doing that for a very long time. I don't know if that has to do with some of the energy that I'm emanating right now. Maybe you can shed some light on that.
Well, we know in older civilizations, that biphasic sleep is how people did it. Their melatonin would kick in when the sun would set. After they ate around the campfire, they'd fall asleep. Around 2 or 3 in the morning is when your brain is the cleanest. And so you may wake up and have, a spiritual experience or a deep thought experience. To me, they're the same thing. And then be able to go back to sleep. So inherently, I think some of the things that we impose on our sleep in this society would not necessarily be how it was if we were living in time with the sun.
Right. And I remember reading, I think it was a Scientific America column recently about how in medieval times, that was the norm, that they went to sleep with the sun, woke up in the middle of the night. The women had extra chores they didn't get to. They got to them in the middle of the night. Some of them had a little fun in the middle of the night. There's all kind of things you can do in the middle of the night. And then they go back to sleep for a couple more hours and the sun rises and they're up for their day. And look, I track my sleep with the Oura ring. So I kind of know I'm getting good total overall sleep quality. But it's just a different way than what modern society considers normal.
Right. Yep. Well, we're also used to being sleep deficient, that if you can even cram in 5 or 6 hours for most moms and dads, that's good. But that if you literally fell asleep with the sunset, eventually your brain would clean itself and you could use some of that middle of the night time to really connect.
Yes. And for me, the connection is to the things that drive me, my passions, the things that make me want to get up in the morning. I literally get up in the middle of the night to start doing some of those things. And that drive, I don't think is by accident. I think there's something higher than myself that puts that in me. And maybe that's some of what we're going to talk about here today.
Yeah, well, Ramadan starts on Monday, and so I'm going to do a fast with Ramadan, for Ramadan. If people want to join me, right now thinking about how I'm going to do that, so I'll let you guys know before Monday. But basically, your brain, when you enter deep delta wave sleep, is when all the frequencies or the oscillations of your brain kind of calm down and slow down. I call it like a hammock. So all day long, you're firing in different phases, basically, of your brain. You're kind of all over the place. And then at night, it just kind of, your brain calms itself down. And I use a lot of analogies rather than explaining the details of the science so everybody can understand. But your neurons then kind of sync up, and it's kind of like a hammock. And the right and left side of your brain connects, and your lymphatic fluid comes in and cleans your brain, especially if you're in ketosis, which you should be in the night. And that's when you eliminate the things that are going to cause you to get the beta amyloid plaque and the tau protein and the things that are going to cause dementia. So, you know, dementia is aging. Dementia is traumatic brain injury. Dementia is concussion. It's just a different time scale of how you've gotten that inflammation in your brain. So when you take the elevator down, I call it, into that deep delta wave sleep, and you have cleaned your brain, when you understand consciousness, you can literally collapse the wave function of consciousness, which is held in a field, it's not held in us, and get closer to source. And then it's just up to you how much knowledge you have to be able to understand the feedback that you're getting or the information that you're getting. So, for example, coders will sometimes say, oh, I went to work, a computer coder, I went to bed and I couldn't figure out what to do with this problem. And then I woke up at 3 a.m. and my brain knew what to do with the problem. Well, yeah, because you consolidated all of the information, you stored your memories, you cleaned away all the junk from the trunk of your brain, your microtubules, which make up your neurons, are firing, and you get your download, you get your information. So some people do it at sunrise, and some people, like you, do it after they've done 2 or 3 cycles of cleaning at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Psst, come here. I gotta tell you about this kit. It is a hair mineral analysis kit to determine your deficiencies in key minerals. It'll also show you your toxicity with heavy metals. It'll show hormones, your immune system, your thyroid, your adrenals, and your metabolism, all in one kit. And all you gotta do is go to upgradedformulas.com, use the coupon code Jimmy, you'll get 15% off this kit, but they have everything that you need to just basically give them a piece of your hair, and they'll show you how to do that. And then you mail it in, and they'll show you specifically where you have deficiencies. And then go to upgradedformulas.com. They have a full array of nanotechnology that will help you shore up those deficiencies in the minerals. So again, upgradedformulas.com, and check it out. Test, don't guess.
It's fascinating to me, and like I said, I've done this now pretty consistently since October. It kind of started 3 years ago, where I would get up at 3:30 in the morning after going to sleep, and then it kind of went back to like 2:30, and like slowly meandered to right around like midnight to 1, and then I'd get up, and like 4 or 5 o'clock, I'm just like, I think it's time to go lay back down again. And then I lay back down for a couple more hours, and I get good cumulative and obviously total restorative types of sleep, deep and REM sleep. So fascinating. And I really haven't met many other people that are like that.
Yep, it's fun.
Well, let's get into the topics du jour, because there are a bunch of them, and a lot of them, quite frankly, I don't have a lot of knowledge about, Courtney. So I'm going to lean on you and my instincts as someone who has curiosity. I will listen attentively and interact with you. But let's start with the basic, like quantum mechanics. Why do people need to understand this?
Everything in our environment is a wave and a particle, and we are living in a 3-dimensional reproduction of everything that's part of a wave of an ocean. So if we're talking about my shirt, if we're talking about my hair, if we're talking about my body or your body, well, before I go into that, I want to say, throughout history, there has been a drive to separate science, biology, quantum mechanics, and spirituality. And there is a point where they all merge, and that point is called the singularity. So if you want to go in the past, if you wanted to go to a scientific meeting and you said you were going to talk about consciousness, it used to be that you were laughed off the stage.
Yeah.
They wouldn't tolerate it.
Right.
We're coming to a point where we're over the past 20 to 30 years for people who are really deep in this. But now I think the general population is starting to realize quantum mechanics is the foundation of every bit of chemistry. Well, physics first, then chemistry, then biology. And we are made of atoms and molecules and DNA and cells, which means those quantum principles exist within us. Now, we used to say that quantum doesn't hold in a warm, wet environment like our body, but we're realizing that in our body, we have things like microtubules that sequester these quantum. Quantum just means teeny tiny units of measure, basically. Teeny, 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 tiny. So you kind of have to think like Ant-Man when you think quantum and shrink yourself down below the size of a hydrogen atom inside of you. What's going on? And in that place, there's even more teeny, 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 tinier that we are trying to figure out the math of, okay, what allows something that teeny, 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 tiny to interact with this field of energy or waves of an ocean that we all move through. And we evolved as beings from mitochondria and bacteria from the ocean to be able to perceive just what matters in this environment, in this simulation, in this, if you can think of the movie The Matrix. So my body, if I were, 2,000 years ago hunting and running from the lion and finding food for my kids, my body can't care about all that subatomic information. There's no, if I had to perceive, it would be like perceiving the data stream into your computer. You wouldn't be able to function. So we evolved only being able to see what was important for our mitochondria, our bodies, to decide, are we going to be stressed? Do we have to hunt and find food or run from a lion? Or are we going to, our mitochondria are going to make us energy so we can procreate and pass on our DNA? So those quantum things, I call them magic, they're happening inside of us and they're happening between us. We just don't perceive them. So we use bigger and bigger microscopes and bigger telescopes to try to study what is happening at that subatomic place between our atoms and that field, and our galaxy in that field. It's the same concept whether you're talking about outer space or teeny tiny particles. Infinitely big out there, infinitely small in here.
Yeah, and when people start talking about the universe and all of that, that's the totality of all the everything. And one of the interests of yours that I thought was curious, and I definitely want you to kind of extrapolate on this a little bit, black holes, because we learn about them in science class when we're younger, but I don't think people realize they have an importance in their life. Can you talk about them a little more?
Sure. Okay, so a black hole is a place that has such a gravitational pull. It has so much mass in such a tiny area. It pulls everything around it in. So if we start with the fact that we are circling, our solar system is circling a black hole. It's called Sagittarius A. It's in the middle of our galaxy, and we think that all galaxies have black holes. That won the Nobel Prize last year. And it won the Nobel Prize by two different researchers who are studying stars that circle it. So we know it's there. Einstein and people before him, but Einstein wrote math that predicted that we would find it. He didn't want to believe it, but his math said that we would find a supermassive black hole in the center of our galaxy and other galaxies. So in 2019, we got the first real picture of a black hole. Why does it look black? It looks black because any subatomic particles that are spinning around it and any light photons that exist around it fall in and get trapped. Meaning, in order to get out of the black hole, you would have to get an ejection velocity or a speed faster than the speed of light to get out of the black hole. So that's a piece of it. We also know that there are microscopic black holes going on around us. So for example, we know that when cosmic rays from high energy emissions in outer space hit our atmosphere, black holes are created. So a black hole is a place in space that can have any radius. So Einstein wrote this math in 1915, and then this guy named Schwarzschild came along, and he defined the radius of a black hole. And he said, we're going to find them that are super teeny tiny, the Planck scale or the quantum scale or the subatomic, smaller than an atom scale. And we're going to find them at scales billions of times the size of our sun. When you have a black hole, all of the information in that black hole, what they call degrees of freedom, or the angles, the information stays the same, whether it's super teeny tiny or whether it's super massive. So we know that we're looking for them at what I call a giant microscope called CERN, or the Center for European Nuclear Research. We're looking for that there. That's the biggest microscope that we have right now on Earth. And we're looking for information with the James Webb Telescope on black holes in outer space right now. More information.
Yeah, a lot of people that watch like The Big Bang Theory, Sheldon Cooper on that show is always talking about the CERN super collider. So.
If you've seen the movie Atom Project on Netflix, we have an Atom Project, and so I think it's helpful for people to watch these TV shows, because then their brains, even if you don't understand physics, your brain can understand, oh, we have an Atom Project, and that Atom Project, ATOM, not ADAM, but it's a play on words, the name of the show. We have one in Switzerland, on the border between Switzerland and France, and they are actually slamming atoms together to see what this field of energy or information that we can't quite perceive what's going on in that space.
Is that a physical block or a mental block, Courtney, that people can't see it? Because there are people that perceive things that are unseen by the naked eye, by the physical eye, but they see things in their mind's eye. Is it because people don't open up their mind's eye enough?
Well, I think there's a couple things. One, we have 5 senses, right? We have these 5 senses. So we evolved with five senses. Some birds, some insects have a larger perception of so the electromagnetic field is one quantum field. And some animals that exist on this planet can see a broader spectrum of the electromagnetic field. Like they can see infrared light. We only see the 7 colors of the rainbow. Some can see ultraviolet light. Some can see infrared light. So we evolved with senses to take in information about our environment so that we could evolve, make babies, do all that stuff. Your mind is more powerful than you can even imagine. So is it possible for you to perceive more about this environment? Maybe, but that's totally dependent on how clean you are, meaning understanding ketosis, autophagy, all the other things that you talk about. So I think that our brains are, I'm going to give you a couple examples.
Okay.
There's something in science called a benzene ring, where the electrons around the carbon in this ring share information. They share what's called a cloud of information, just like a cloud, like a internet cloud. They share information. And the scientist who discovered that realized it because he had a dream about I always mess up this word, but it's called a rooibos, the snake that's eating its tail. He dreamed about that and woke up in one of his clean states like you have in the middle of the night, but his focus was chemistry. And he realized, oh my gosh, this benzene ring is sharing information between the electrons around the whole carbon ring.
Yep.
So it goes back to what I was saying at the beginning. When you are clean and focused and you have a high level of knowledge of whatever it is that you are working on, that's intuition, but that's a download from somewhere.
Yeah.
That's a download from this quantum field. That's information that you're getting that it already exists in nature.
Yeah, and I can give you an example. A few years back, there was a total eclipse. You might remember that. It kind of went across the whole United States, and I was right in that strip where it got totally dark here. And I have backyard chickens, Courtney, and so as the eclipse was starting, it hadn't even fully gotten dark yet outside. As it was starting, my chickens started acting weird. I mean, making noises I had never heard. You could feel this groan from within that they sensed something was off
Right.
from the norm. And we think of chickens as stupid, but those chickens have a lot more of a sense about what was happening than even we did.
Right. Well, I mean, in science, we know that birds navigate based on electromagnetic radiation. We know dogs can find their way home based on electromagnetic radiation. We know that that even the plants entangle light to give us oxygen. So there's so much more going on that we perceive. And because of those things, when we started this conversation, I said the scientists don't want to talk about consciousness. And we have this separation of church and state. Because of those divisions, if you even want to talk about this stuff, until very recently, you were just kicked out of the conversation when all roads lead to the singularity. So you asked about black holes, and the one thing that I didn't say is once you spin around a black hole and you fall in, there is no time and no space in that place. So in this place that I keep referring to as a singularity, there is no time and there is no space. They are interchangeable. To me, that sounds a lot like what the Bible calls heaven. A lot like what the Bible calls heaven. So if we are looking in science right now for what they call the unified theory of everything.
Yeah.
So we know that Einstein told us that gravity is how a mass distorts the fabric of space-time to hold something close to it. That's why I always say the sun holds us in its hug or its embrace by gravity. That's called general relativity. And again, I use analogies. If there's physicists in here, I apologize. I use analogies so people can get a visual for what I'm saying. At the quantum scale, we don't quite understand exactly how that works. But at the quantum scale, we know that there is a transfer from energy to mass, E equals mc squared. So, and that also equals frequency. So when people say energy, frequency, vibration, what they're really saying is energy equals mass times the speed of light in a vacuum times the frequency of oscillation, or those things are equal, energy, frequency, vibration. So we know that there is some place that we are going to be able to study, and it's going to be at this giant microscope even more, what's going on with the interaction between the subatomic particles or the quarks that make up our protons and neutrons in our atoms and that field. And that's what we are like honing in on day after day after day. So the best unification theory, so Einstein died looking for what unifies general relativity or how gravity works on this massive scale in outer space, and how does gravity work on this super teeny tiny quantum scale. That's what we're studying at CERN. And the best math that we have is something called M theory. And M theory says that there are bridges or membranes or brains or strings or little teeny tiny particles that we can't perceive that connect everything to everything. And they are vibrating, and the way they vibrate gives rise to the quarks and the protons and the neutrons and the electrons and the atoms and the molecules and our DNA and our cells and our organs and everything that makes up us. So they are looking for, I'm going to say it again, the unified theory of everything. Right now, the best prediction that we have is M theory. It's called M theory, to understand how we interact with that field or that place where these singularities exist.
It's been 3 years since the release of my last book, but now I have written a brand new book called One Step Deeper Journal, The Foundations, featuring my co-host of my One Step Deeper podcast, Brittany Lee Davis. And this, you guys, is going to be an incredible book for those of you who struggle with mindset, struggle with why you believe things the way you do, if you've gone through any kind of trauma in your life. We got you. It's a 40-day journal. We're going to take you through all of the different topics. Brittany and I actually give you a lot of our own personal story. There will be lots of places to do journal entries where we prod you. This is one of the proudest books I've ever written, and it's available at onestepdeeperjournal.com. Within the next few days, we're expecting it to be available on Amazon. So go check it out. One Step Deeper Journal, The Foundations.
Yeah, and again, back to Big Bang Theory, that was the field of study that the character Sheldon Cooper had, was M theory, string theory. And at some point, he got frustrated because another string theory scientist was like, there's nothing new that's happening in the field. It's a dead field. And then he had like this existential, am I wasting all of my mental energy on this field that can never be proven? Are we any closer now to it actually being proven and people understanding it better?
Okay, well, Peter Higgs predicted that we would find the Higgs boson, which is the particle of mass that slows down energy and gives rise to the mass that we see. And we only see 4% of the mass that exists around us. Like with your eyes, everything that you're looking at, me, you, me, the phone, my office, your background, your pink light behind you, that's only 4%. So 96% of the stuff we can't perceive because it doesn't have light in the way we perceive light. Okay? It's not that it's dark. They call it dark, but it doesn't have light in the way that we perceive light. Yeah, exactly. Get out of here. So, we're basically just trying to dial it in, trying to dial it in closer. And the book is about, okay, well, when, if we're looking for the quantum gravity that entangles particles or connects them at this place called CERN, then the subatomic particles that make up the sperm and the egg, when they entangle, we can see in human biology a giant explosion of zinc out of the zygote. Now I'm switching to fertilization for those of you who have a hard time tracking me. I jump all over the place. But when that happens, we can see a giant firework. And that firework is visible not because it's really light. That firework is visible because Tom O'Halloran and Teresa Woodruff at Northwestern University and their assistant, who I think her name is Emily, they tagged it with a fluorescent dye. So at the moment the sperm and egg hit, we can see 20 billion zinc atoms fly out of the cell. That is a hallmark that there has been a giant transfer of energy from somewhere into that egg. If there's enough force or enough energy to see 20 billion zinc atoms fly out of that cell, that means that it got some sort of huge energy hit at that moment. We know that we pace the speed of calcium across the cell and it's traveling at 250 miles an hour. So once the sperm hits the egg, there are 250 mile an hour calcium oscillations. And that calcium flies across the cell and then the zinc explodes out. So there's something going on there that is more energy than any human being can comprehend. Now, at CERN, we're looking for, when these protons collide, defects basically. So I tell people, think of it like a giant racetrack, a giant Hot Wheels track. They're sending the protons or the Hot Wheels cars, and pieces are flying off, and they're using artificial intelligence and quantum computing to track what is flying off, where are the defects, what other little subatomic particles are connecting everything to everything there. If we're looking for a unified theory of everything, the unified theory of everything is what we are, what makes up us. My individual light, your individual light is in that zygote. That is the connection to the singularity. I know, it's a lot.
I like have to take it in and breathe a little bit. So we are talking, you guys, those that came in late, to Dr. Courtney Hunt. She is the author of a book called Your Spirit, or Spark, excuse me, is Light. Your Spark is Light, the Quantum Mechanics of Human Creation, available now on Amazon. But she also gives you, in her link tree right on her page on Instagram, an ability to download the PDF for free. Like that's integrity there, by the way. So good job. Go over to her page, Courtney Hunt MD, over on Instagram, and you can grab that. We're also doing a fundraiser. You'll notice at the bottom, Children of the Night Inc. So those of you watching live, please go and support that fundraiser. Helps out these kids in very bad situations. So definitely support that while we're here on the air. And we're going to go a little while. So stick around, guys. And those of you listening or watching later, it is childrenofthenightinc.org if you'd like to make a donation. But let's get back into this, because there was a word you threw at me when you're like, hey, let's talk about this. I was like, I don't know what that is. Parthenogenesis? What are we talking about there?
Okay, so I think everybody would agree that there are people on this planet who want to maximize our longevity and play with our mortality.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there are people who want to figure out how to upload consciousness to a chip.
Yeah.
There are people who want to be able to live to 300 and 400 years. Okay. There are scientists who, and there's actually a Silicon Valley company that is funded by the same people who fund DeepMind, Google's DeepMind, which is an artificial intelligence company, to try to figure out parthenogenesis. It's basically immaculate conception.
Okay.
It's the ability to make a baby for a couple who wants to have a baby if the egg doesn't work or if the sperm doesn't work. So we have achieved parthenogenesis, and some animals do this, but we have achieved artificial creation of a mammal, of a living creature without an egg. And so there is a company that's trying to do that for humans. So you can look at that as, and without a sperm, you can look at that as cutting edge science. My concern is, okay, well, we got CRISPR, and somebody took CRISPR and put it into twins in another country without much ethical concern for what's going to happen with changing those embryos. How far?
Stop there a second. What's CRISPR?
Okay, so CRISPR is clustered regularly interspaced palindromic sequences of DNA. It basically just means, you know, like a man, a plan, a canal, Panama, how that's the same forwards and backwards. Okay, we evolved on this planet with viruses injecting their DNA into bacteria to force evolution, meaning bacteria and viruses evolving together with mitochondria. Nature, God, the universe, the math, the physics, the chemistry, however you look at it, gave us that to evolve. That's one of the ways we were evolved to this place that we are today. And I consider us the highest level of evolved consciousness creating this reality. Two Berkeley researchers and an MIT researcher, maybe, 15 years ago, figured out how to take palindromic DNA. So your DNA, for those of you who don't know DNA, your DNA is code of ATCG, just different repeating base pairs, the code for every protein in your body that makes all of your body work. So they figured out, okay, what's causing evolution is pieces of DNA that reads the same backwards and forwards, palindromic DNA, a man, a plan, a canal, Panama, or ATCG on this side, and TG, whatever that would be on the reverse on this side. They figured out that that's how God or the universe or viruses are doing that. And then they learned how to cut to a single base pair DNA. They worked on it for many years. Jennifer Doudna and Michel Charpentier won the Nobel Prize in 2020 for that. There was a huge patent war about it that was just won by MIT. But that has been freely available to the public scientists to use for many years, CRISPR. And so it's how you edit genes with complete, precise, targeted cutting, splicing. So that's how over millions of years of evolution we got to this point, one of the ways. Now humans have the power to control it. So 3 years ago now, a Chinese researcher went to Stanford, learned how to do it. It's not, from what I've heard, I don't know how to do it, but from what I've heard, it's not hard to do in the lab. And then he took it back and he edited 2 twin girls whose father had HIV. So they were fertilized, he took the embryos out, he spliced up their DNA, and he modified it so that they would not run the risk of getting their dad's HIV. And then they grew them and they put them back in the mom and they were born. But in doing so, that specific gene that he spliced and diced also affects those girls' cognition. So it affects something called the pruning of the brain. So potentially, there are only 3, but potentially they're going to be geniuses. So that's just one example. I mean, we're CRISPRing our food. We're at the point where we're CRISPRing for sickle cell anemia. We're CRISPRing for diabetes. We're CRISPRing. There's trials going on now to CRISPR a lot of things in humanity, which is great. If you have a child with cystic fibrosis, and you can afford to take your child to, I don't know, San Francisco or wherever this is going on and enroll your child in that trial, great. But we need to take pause and think about the ethics of what about the other 100 children who have cystic fibrosis and their parents can't afford to fly them to a lab in UCSF and have that done. So that's just one example of where we are playing God.
Yes.
Without, right? If there's 263 people here, if people didn't know what CRISPR was and that it's already been done on these 2 twins in China, A, they're not going to get HIV, which is an advantage, but B, they might be Einsteins. That's a huge advantage, right? Yeah. So we have to wait and see how they develop. That is one place where we are playing with fertilization. Now, where this research is going on, these researchers are literally saying, we're looking for the M theory of how the consciousness gets into the body. So we're going to go to these meetings and not talk about how consciousness gets into the body, but we are looking for the mathematical equation for how consciousness gets into the body. And they're getting really close. At some point in the future, they're going to get there. So that's my point. How close are we going to be before we allow all of the population to understand what's CRISPR, what's M theory? We've got artificial intelligence now that can already calculate protein folding. So that's huge. That's a whole nother topic we can break if you have questions about what I just said, but it's huge. And so we have this group of people who are well educated, who understand this. Not many people are overseeing the ethics of it. And the bulk of the 8 billion of us have no idea that it even is happening.
Time to get inspiration from the Living La Vida Low Carb Show. Hey, the livinglowcarbshow.com. Woo!
Have you experienced the dreaded keto flu? Did you know that most of these symptoms are actually due to your body dumping excess electrolytes? This is where Element comes in. Element is a tasty electrolyte drink mix with everything you need and nothing you don't. That means lots of salt with no sugar. Element is formulated to help anyone with their electrolyte needs and is perfectly suited to folks following a keto, low-carb, or paleo diet. Element contains a science-backed electrolyte ratio, 1,000 milligrams of sodium, 200 milligrams potassium, and 60 milligrams of magnesium, with none of the junk, no sugar, no coloring, no artificial ingredients, no gluten, no fillers, no BS. Everyone needs electrolytes, especially those on low-carb diets, or if you practice intermittent or extended fasting, if you're physically active, or sweat a lot. Add Element today and see how much better you feel and perform. Use the URL drinklmnt.com/Jimmy.